Good morning. Thanks to everybody joining us, both here in the webinar and the live stream. We're going to get started. I want to welcome Andrew Thomas from the UAE. Good morning, Andrew. And somebody's got to unmute Andrew. We need to.
Aha, success.
There we go. Yeah, we need to get our technical issues out of the way. Now we can get started. I am not going to make any big introductions and let us drone on about, we talked about that, of how webinars love to start with these long, boring introductions. People want to know who we are. They can go to LinkedIn, and I think that's right. That's great. I'll just say that Andrew's joined us from UAE and he runs the top digital marketing agency out there, Nexa, and he's going to help us figure out what it is we want to do. As I said a couple days ago, we're a few weeks, more than a month into this new relationship between the two countries, and I've been hearing a lot of questions. Okay, where's the leads? What do just by it's like just like I put out a campaign. Why aren't there leads? So
that's it, yeah. What's happening?
I think we agreed we want to talk about, and as I said to you before, Andrew, and we had a previous conversation, is our customers are B2B technology companies, primarily companies that do kind of deep tech. Some of them are doing analytics, cyber, all kinds of marketing softwares, and they're looking get into medium and large businesses. And there's a lot of those in the Gulf region. And I'd love to pick your brain and figure out what is it that we can do tomorrow morning to get started. So that's kind of where I want to start.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, no, look, thank you for the invitation and opportunity. But looking forward to this as far as getting the opportunity to speak to everyone and kind of give some pointers, as far as this part of the world. So, timing is interesting from a technology perspective. So GITEX is on this week, which is the kind of largest regional IT show, or was up until kind of pre-COVID. So that's been running for the last 25 plus years, and UAE is very much seen as a regional hub for IT activity, right? IT industry. So even around the surrounding Gulf, a lot of the clients are serviced directly from here. So it's a good lift off as far as getting involved, and be it hardware, software, fintech, security, whatever the dynamic may be. There's obviously that. I think that one of the things that's the first consideration. So consider the fact that as much as obviously everyone there wants to come here, there's also everyone in India that wants to come here, everyone in Singapore that wants to. So you are kind of competing with some other global players, right? So I think that's important to understand, because it's not just, okay, cool, like you said, let's turn on that lead tap and let's just see them all flow in, right? So there's basically similar kind of oh, there's a little poll that's just popped up. Let me just mute that one down. So it is important to appreciate that obviously there is that competitive environment here, but that's also a positive thing, right? Because it gives people in the region an opportunity to really kind of decide who they want to work with, right? And this also again becomes important as part of that messaging, right? So think in mind that how are you going to position yourself with these organizations that allow them to understand why you are perhaps better than a provider in potentially kind of US or India or Singapore or Europe even. Where is it? What are your clients look like? So who's your client makeup? Who are you currently working with? Who they would recognize globally? What are some of the client testimonials? And this may seem like basics, but it's important to have those kind of lined up, right? And then look, as far as as far as the communication, as much as, you know, we're in an Arab speaking part of the world, that communication in UAE doesn't necessarily have to be in Arabic. So, you know, the language of business is generally English, right? I mean, I've been in the region 22 plus years, right? So, you know, managed to get by during that time with my kind of you know, basic Shway Arabic. So, you know, it's from a business perspective. So even as a point of communication, if you're thinking about running some campaigns, you know, to a particular target audience here, English is still something that you can start with. If you go to the wider field, GCC, you know, Saudi, these places, it's a bit of a blend. So better to have some bilingual offering or some dedicated Arabic, dedicated English.
So a couple of important points. First is, and I think it's really important, I think being humble is a key factor in any for any leadership, whether it be personal or company leadership, is great. There's these accords, but don't assume that you're special because of them.
Yes.
There's many companies and many countries that have been here and are established for many years before you. You need to communicate over and above just the accords and what's your you know, back to basics.
Yeah.
You know, why should I care?
Exactly.
That's great. And second is, I think that's a really important point, is because is that you can, if you've been marketing in English, you can use English first and start launching campaigns, and it might make some companies, because a lot of companies are at least of our, you know, in our customer base, are US first, then they're starting to look into Europe. Europe is really complex from a language perspective.
Yes.
And here we may be able to repackage some of the things that we've been using in the UAE, because there's not a language barrier to get started.
I mean, even if you look at the demographic makeup of specifically the UAE, so you kind of have, you know, you got those 7 Emirates, but the main hubs are Abu Dhabi and Dubai. And Dubai is really that kind of, you know, commercial focus. This is the first place that had Dubai Internet City, Dubai Media City. You know, all of the kind of global and regional players have a base here from an IT perspective. So, you know, but if you look at that demographic makeup, 85% is expat, right? So you got people from all over the world, not just expat Arab, but like myself, expat European, you know, US, wherever you name it, everyone is here. And they've all got roles within the organization. So, you know, that that common communication is in English. As I said, when you start to move into kind of other regions like Saudi, Bahrain, these places, you know, Bahrain, for example, it's a smaller market, but it also has easy access into Saudi Arabia. But again, that's more of a mixed bilingual, and sometimes some dedicated Arabic engagement. But again, you know, you've got to make sure, and going back to those basics, as you mentioned there, Perry, you've got to make sure that if you're communicating in that language, we've got to bear in mind that there's certain dialects as well. So there's different dialects here in Arabic, to Saudi, to, you know, other places, right? Classic kind of, you know, Arabic with Egyptian, and then kind of so even that messaging, if you choose to go down that path, has got to be correct, right? And then as soon as you start to intake those leads, you know, as soon as they start to come in, you've got to be able to handle them at that point as well, because the communication has been purely up to, you know, from a cultural, from a language perspective to Arabic, and then, you know, then you've got to make sure you can intake that. So probably kind of, as you mentioned, if you're already running campaigns in US and it's English language, that's a good starting point. Yeah.
Okay. So just let's move to the next. So we're talking about companies that are trying to get technology into the region. What are the top industries? So
yeah, that's a great question. So if you look at this part of the world, you know, like there's massive expansion and massive growth, obviously, over the last 30 years, right? So genuinely, this was desert 30 years ago, you know, and obviously, if we look at the makeup, a large driver of kind of Abu Dhabi and investment across a federal level across the UAE has been through its oil wealth. So obviously, you know, massive untapped reserves, steel and gas as well. So they've been able to, you know, kind of to a certain extent rely on that part for their economy, and a lot of that is economically driven. So you have, you know, ADNOC, which is the largest kind of government entity that kind of looks after that whole process. And obviously associated to that, there is a whole host of other business that has grown up out of it, right? And including kind of in the IT sector, from a support mechanism, from business intelligence, from analytics, everything else associated to that. When we look at Dubai specifically, very different, right? So no oil wealth here. It's very driven by commerce, hospitality, retail, real estate. You know, these are the spaces that play very well in this environment. So, you know, tourism is a huge driver. So, you know, the overall kind of plan of Dubai is drive people to Dubai. Once people get to Dubai, it's very much, wow, this is a great place to live. I'm going to set up a business here, or this is a great place to have a holiday home. I'm going to buy a holiday home, or I'm going to relocate my family here. So everything associated to, you know, expat environment has an opportunity. So that may be real estate, it may be educational because I've got to send my kids somewhere. It may be hospitality because obviously there's a ludicrous amount of hotels here. It may be F&B, you know, so and then obviously then you've got the other activity, like, you know, it's a logistics hub. So here in Dubai, you have Jebel Ali free zone and port. They also have a bonded road to Dubai World Central, which is means that, you know, as far as import and export, there's a massive import and export for the region that obviously kind of fans out. So there's huge opportunities in logistics, warehousing, you know, deliveries, and obviously everything associated to import and export. So it really is like, you know, I don't want to say, you know, it's like rich pickings, as it were. But it's tough. Don't get me wrong. But there is massive opportunities in multiple verticals, because essentially, as I said, it was a sandbar. So everything has kind of grown up at the same time, right? It's kind of all done this. So, you know, that's why there's good opportunities.
Okay, well, like the Israelis can identify with desert to prosperity, I think. So,
Definitely, exactly.
but it does sound like there are a lot of sectors, and as years go on, innovation is needed in those areas.
Yeah,
And
yeah, for
so
sure.
there's a
Because
lot of opportunity.
yeah, because I think the thing is that there is, you know, that as much as this part of the world is very technology savvy, okay, they're highly connected individuals. There's a very low, like the population, average age of the population in UAE is 32. So there's a very, you know, young, kind of millennial, Gen Z, Gen Y environment that are highly connected. A lot of people have, you know, 2, 3 phones as standard here, like multiple devices that are always on. Huge mobile engagement, but that sometimes doesn't translate into a business environment. Yeah. So
So
yeah.
no, so I was going to say that it's interesting that you're talking about the average age. So if we're looking at the decision makers within these industries, um, and it and their ages, how do we reach them? Like, what are the channels that are, you know, when we talk about campaigning and campaigns? I don't want to get confused with campaigning. A lot of
Yeah, we'll
um,
stay away from that.
yeah. But the, you know, where should, you know, where is, if there are a lot of, they're on mobile, I'm
Yeah.
assuming there's a lot of social media, but what do you find it's working? I mean, you guys are running a ton of campaigns locally,
Yeah.
so what's working?
Yeah, so from a B2B perspective, you know, it's pretty straightforward as far as, you know, lowest hanging fruit is still a Google environment. So, you know, people that are looking for your solutions and your products are going to go to Google first. So I think working on, you know, now working on that organic play is crucial. So working on your SEO, making sure that you're visible in a Google ranking or organic environment. And in the meantime, it's using, Google Ads, right, to drive some of that search traffic back to you. I mean, as I was saying, as much as everyone's got an iPhone here, Apple Pay only came in, I want to say 18 months ago. You'll go into organizations, they don't have a CRM, they run off of Excel, so there's kind of almost like a disconnect between personal, highly connected life to business environment. And that's sometimes back to that age thing where you had, guys that were kind of starting businesses and almost doing it as a side piece, and then other large families working on other pieces. And sometimes the technology hasn't got caught up. So as much as it's all singing, it's all dancing, it's shiny, it's brand new from an outside perspective, when you start to kind of scratch a bit, there's still opportunity for technology, right? Because a lot of the US firms, quite frankly, they don't really look at the UAE because it's too small, yeah. So like they just won't even look at this place. Whereas Saudi is probably their first go-to, just because of sheer number of people. But there's only about 11 million people here, right? So it's relatively small, and end to end, kind of Dubai is 30 minutes, and kind of you go wider, Abu Dhabi down the road is an hour and 10 minutes, so it's relatively short. But going back to how do I start to target these individuals? For sure, Google is that first port of call. LinkedIn is heavily used here, so there is LinkedIn is not just a place to find jobs, right, or kind of look for jobs. It's actually used from a business perspective, and we've seen a huge increase in LinkedIn usage, I'd say, over the last 2 years, right? And more about also positioning of individuals within inside an organization. So not just the company itself, but then key individuals and how they position themselves as well. Twitter is not really used as much here. As far as when you look elsewhere, it's dominant in Saudi Arabia. So it's a platform that you have to be on and you have to be engaged on in Saudi Arabia. In the UAE, it's more used as a consumer interactive point. So the government does communicate through Twitter to kind of national population and expats. You do have companies that use it, like Emirates and kind of FedEx and stuff, for customer service. Mm. But I'd say that as far as targeting, LinkedIn has the best opportunity to target the right individuals. Yeah. So targeting those decision makers, and I wouldn't let the average age affect the decision too much. That is the average age, but obviously you've still got some people, some old guys like me, or you got some younger people, and you got some even older guys, right, that perhaps have a bit more gray in their beard. So you've got a bit of a balance, but those are the first two. And then because there's such high usage of social media here, pre-COVID, it was 3 hours a day, right? Social, like Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok, right? What we say is we basically advise our clients to look at this as an opportunity to remarket yourself to those individuals. So we wouldn't necessarily, from a B2B perspective, run a campaign on TikTok, right? A singular campaign. But what we would do is we would use that as part of retargeting, yeah, and YouTube, right? So I mean, the usage on social is phenomenal here. I think the explosion from social, so things like Snap is huge here, mainly because it's a very private social platform. So obviously, Arabs as culturally are very private individuals when it comes to family. So they don't publicly show, as much as they would. So a lot of people have a public Instagram account and a private Snap account, but they spend a lot of time on Snap. So you're able to kind of target them on there. So yeah, it's kind of, that's where I'd say, hit the ground running, Google, LinkedIn for targeting perspective, and then ultimately making sure that you kind of retarget them across those different social channels.
Okay. So let's maybe switch gears a little bit to what I would call direct versus channel. So there are customers that sell SaaS, they're people or companies go in with their credit card and start using. But a lot of companies that we work with, the solutions are a lot more enterprise. You need just a lot more touch points. How do you advise, now that it is a 3-hour flight, companies might think, I don't need to have a presence. Maybe they do. What's your advice to them from finding channel partners, finding or working direct?
Okay. Yeah, it's a good question. So, pre-COVID, it was very much boots on the ground, right? So if you were going anywhere in the region, that parachute in a week, 2 days, meetings out did work for some organizations. But if they really wanted to grow the space, they had to have a physical presence. They had to have boots on the ground, people here. I'd say that's still valid, but not so much from an early stage perspective. So as part of a discovery, this is normal. Zoom is normal now for kind of everyone in the region, right? And look, we should understand that when COVID kind of hit here, the region wasn't really set up for that. So for example, VoIP was banned here. Zoom, you couldn't use Zoom in your home. You couldn't use Skype. There's no FaceTime here, right? So none of this was possible pre-COVID, and then the TRA, the Telephone Regulatory Authority, opened everything up for COVID, right, and allowed businesses and individuals to communicate globally. So I think that's been beneficial to companies over there that may want to start that first initial conversations, and we've been having them, right? Companies have kind of contacted us, and we've had conversations. As far as identifying, the channel partners and working with them, that's still very much alive and kicking. Okay. So, the format previously here was that you had to have a local partner if you wanted to operate as a business. So, instead of that, what they would do is, traditionally brands would, set up in a free zone and then identify channel partners, right, for them to work with. So there still is some strong channel partners here that work very aggressively when you don't want to direct sell. What I would say is that you have to make sure that you're choosing the right channel partner from a digital perspective. So we're working with some, let's say, large, document control clients, and their partners were very old school here. Going out, knocking on doors, not so much digitally savvy. So now, when kind of COVID kicked in, everything, it spun them through a loop, right? They're not that right partner. They've been the right partner for the last 20 years, because previously business was done with events. Right, you have a coffee morning, you had a cocktail reception, you'd have a speaker, you've had a conference, you do old school hand shaking, all this kind of stuff. But obviously, that a lot of that has gone away now. So I'd say if it is something from a channel perspective, you've got to make sure that you kind of dig a bit deeper and understand their digital capabilities and their ability to handle a kind of a more savvy conversation, let's say.
Okay. What about shifting gears again? We've seen over the last few years that brand, lead generation is important, but brand is so important. Is even much more important, getting your message out there and being recognized. And it goes to what one of your first points being, you may be the greatest things since sliced bread in the US market, and this, coming into a new market, probably nobody's heard of you. Every company has competitors. So whatever you're offering probably already has an established player. So now we have to establish the brand. Is there something unique in the approach, or that you would advise as you're trying to break into the region and create a brand?
Yeah, that Brandscape is super important. As you said, you could count phenomenal customers, and they may not be relevant in this part of the world. I'd say that if you do have, as you mentioned, I think a lot of the organizations have a lot of customers and clients in the US. I think definitely talk about that. So, definitely talk about the fact that you're working with, multinational, international companies outside the region, and you have been for the last, 5, 10, 2 years or whatever, right? I think that's important to kind of emphasize and approach them that they know nothing of this. Okay. So obviously one of the reasons that we're doing this, and then we're going to have one next week where I'm asking you the questions about there, is that we're here, we're blind, and we have been blind to your part of the world. So we're not familiar with brands, not familiar with companies. So I think that's you mentioned it before, being humble and kind of taking a step back and saying, well, okay, this is the first touch point, and this is the first thing they're going to find out about me. So I think it goes back to basics. It's leveraging testimonials, it's leveraging customer stories, it's leveraging implementations, it's working on demonstrations or simulations, proof of concepts. It's trying all of those various angles to start an open line of communication, right? And kind of get something going. So I'd say from a brand perspective, it's sometimes here, I guess it's quite easy with the right approach, and the right kind of weight behind you, as it were, to really kind of make an impact.
Okay. So still have a few more minutes, and I got a question that I should have had on my list, but someone reminded me that we are considered a startup nation, and we have a lot of startups here. And so we've been talking a lot about established companies. One of the things that help startups get their first customers or get into new regions is because there's a lot of companies out there that are looking for innovation, willing to take a risk. How is that? How would that translate in the UAE or in the region? Are companies looking only if you've worked with multinationals, or you have a lot of proof points, or will they be willing to bring you in and take a chance on you? So do startups have a chance there?
Yeah. So yes, they do. So I mean, look, yes, they do. Obviously, the conversation we've been having is at an enterprise layer and established organizations, but there is an appetite for, as you said, innovation, right? So there's a very entrepreneurial spirit that lives and breathes across the region, and again, a lot of that's due to the age, right? So you imagine that average age of 30, it's even younger in Saudi Arabia. These are people that have grown up with technology thrust upon them, right? With the latest and greatest in tech, yeah. So they're always looking for something new, okay. And there's a lot of innovation hubs. There's a lot of startup hubs here. Traditionally, it's been, from a price point perspective, difficult for startups to cost, but there's a whole host of wave of that changing. So yeah, startup opportunity, very much so. There's an appetite to try new things. There's an appetite to really kind of understand that innovation piece, right? Because a lot of organizations here, that they haven't innovated. As I said, you've got green fields for companies without CRMs, companies without it's still scary, but you've got large mid-sized organizations running around with bits of paper, right? What's that? Oh, it's my client list. Huh? Hold on. What? So it's kind of like it's exactly, yeah. It's pretty scary. So I'd say that what we've even seen, for example, is these larger organizations and mid-range organizations have come in and since COVID have kind of started conversations. We're so far behind, and you wouldn't think it from the outside. And I also think that from a pricing perspective, obviously, as a startup, you may be able to go in there and offer something a bit more of a reasonable kind of investment, plus also possibly even some of these proof of concepts. So going in and kind of working with an organization and growing with them, right, from an innovation and tech perspective. So it's there's not, we're not saturated here with tech and innovation by no means, right? There's still vast opportunity in organizations. Now, companies that are new here, so company, you know, there's a massive influx of companies that are setting up here as well continually. So that's another opportunity. You know, there may be a brand new organization that fires up here in Dubai and needs, you know, wants to work with, you know, this new startup here, right? Because there's some close affinity to that individual. So I think the thing is that it's not, you know, why has this part of the world been so successful? Because basically it's just attracted, you know, talent and individuals and people over the years, and nothing stopped. So, you know, organizations are still firing up regional offices, companies are still looking for opportunities. There's, you know, and also this part of the world has handled COVID very well. So, you know, we kind of, it was back to business. We locked down for, I think, close to 6 weeks, but then it was pretty much back to business. So everyone's masked up, everyone's kind of taken consideration, but pretty much, you know, from a business perspective, it hasn't been allowed to stop, right? You know, we can't stop, right?
Okay. So I just got another question here. Are there any technology accelerators, incubators, that maybe some of the startups that are on?
Yeah.
Yeah,
there's a whole host of them. There's ones that are kind of government backed here. There's ones private enterprise. So what we can do actually is we can put together a list. So we can kind of pull together a list. There's like Hub 71 is quite a popular one. That's down in Emirates Towers down in Dubai. You've got 2424, which is the technology and media one in Abu Dhabi, which is quite big. And then you've got some where the organization will obviously get involved and provide seed funding and kind of work with you. And then there's others that obviously just provide a space, discounted office space, licensing, you know, and then also introductory network as well. So there's a huge choice when it comes to accelerator and startup environment.
Yeah, and you know, I've seen a few startup CEOs on the attendees and a couple of messages that I got. So I would encourage you guys, you know, and I know of one that specifically that has some great solutions for travel, personalized videos. Hint, hint. He knows who I'm talking about. Should definitely check out how we can take advantage of that. But I think there was one thing that we also spoke about that I want to make note of. I think as we have we're heavily attended by marketers who will take what you're sharing, apply it, and the leads will. I'm certain their leads will start pouring in. Before they do that, or while they're doing that, what are like some limitations or some considerations that the company as a business might need to take? You know, one of the things that you mentioned was around data protection, or you know, other kinds of legal type things that we might want to. They might want to alert their product and CEO and.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, we have to be mindful. Data protection is a good point, Barry. So basically, there's certain rules in place for nationals, Gulf nationals, where their data, financial or health data, sometimes customer data, cannot be stored in the cloud. So what we have is there's data centers here and in Saudi across the region, premise-based for Oracle, Microsoft, Amazon, etc. So you know, one of the things we have a lot of, you know, customers, HubSpot customers in Saudi Arabia, but you know, we've had some government or semi-government organizations that have said, look, you know, I can't do the full engagement. I'm just going to be able to use the platform for marketing purposes. As soon as they become a customer, I'm going to have to kind of remove them from that. So I'd say that, you know, we have to be mindful of that. It's more of your kind of larger organizations. I'd say when you're talking to SMEs, you know, that doesn't really crop up. There's no GDPR in place here. So, as far as ABM campaigns or kind of reaching out directly to individuals as from an outbound perspective. So we spoke a lot about obviously inbound and Google, but we should say that there is an opportunity for outbound. So, using LinkedIn potentially in the Sales Navigator to reach out to potential contacts, and then also, acquiring data and targeting those individuals specifically with an ABM program or a nurturing program. That's another area that you could go after, because the GDPR, that's not really here at the moment.
Okay. Maybe let's spend the last few minutes talking about the culture, right? There is, Israeli marketers, marketers in general, I think are working on, when they create a messaging, they have to take that into account. So, as a people, we're quite direct. We like to get down to business. We call it tachlis. You already speak a few words in Hebrew.
I've learned more now, right?
Yeah, but we know that the Americans, they love their small talk. You gotta check the weather and whatever baseball or football team they're doing before you call them up, so you can have something to chit chat about. So that, but it's still very, very online, and I think it's become very acceptable in the U.S. that you can sell distance selling, but that small talk is important. Where are things at so the first question will be around, how does that translate into from a cultural perspective, the selling process? And then on the second question will be the messaging. Can we use similar messaging? Maybe we can use the same language as we are using for the US, but are there certain things that are off limits, because we like to use humor, or we might like to be sarcastic or things like that, and there are things that we need to be thinking about.
Cool. Okay, so that's good. So so I'll take you back like 22 years when I first came in this part of the world, and I was selling door to door in Saudi Arabia in Al-Khobar, and I think that's where I kind of found my love for Arabica coffee, because that's all I did for weeks. Like coffee, I had coffee. We spoke about family. We spoke about friends. We spoke about it was untold meetings before even mentioning why I was even there. Right, they just thought I was some random British dude that rocked up and just decided to have a cup of coffee with them. So I think fast forward, culturally, there's still, and it's interesting, as much as even in Dubai, it's a very expat driven community. Culturally, everyone's kind of adopted that kind of, how's your family, how are you doing. What weather for us is hot and sunny every day, so we don't really have a weather chat. It's kind of, so that's still there. Culturally, it's still there. What's changed with COVID is now it's Zoom. It's not as comfortable to have a 15-minute conversation about the family, right? When you're like this, you kind of, okay, well, we've got 45 minutes and then I've got the next Zoom meeting. So I think there's been more direct to and that's been a cultural shift as well. So people like to meet here. They like to meet people. They like to see each other, shake hands. That was a huge thing. I mean, it may sound insane, but there's a lot of personal body contact, as it were, in this part of the world, right? You get people coming from Europe, and why does everyone want to shake my hand? Like, what's going on? Why does everyone want to hold my hand? Why do they want to take me around the office holding my hand, right? So it's kind of, all of that's kind of been stripped away now, obviously. So there's definitely movement in that area. I think you still have to be mindful of the fact that you can't just go in and go, hey, let's do business, right? But again, the guys that are there, obviously, that are on the session today, you're commercially driven, so if it's a guy that wants to talk about the fact that he was out last night, or it's a guy that's like, let's go, right? So I think again, you're not always talking to an Emirati, right? Or an Arab. You might be talking to me. You might be talking to a French dude, an Indian dude, Pakistani dude, right? So, or dudette. Sorry, I should say, like, I'm saying a lot of dudes, but dudette as well, like, ladies, right? So that, you may be talking to a whole host of different nationalities, right? So that's the first thing. So I'd say there's a shift. So be mindful, but be practical in the sense and see the engagement. The second part, as far as cultural sensitivity, yes, there is certain cultural sensitivity here. So, for example, as much as we can drink freely here, right? Not a problem. We can't market alcohol, right? So what that means is other things that we may want to market around, like you said, tongue in cheek, sense of humor, perhaps risky. We have to be a bit careful, right? Yes, humor resonates because I think it definitely pulls all of us together, right? There's definitely, I think that's one of the cultural things that brings everyone together, that there's humor associated, and there's huge humor, especially when you look at kind of the Egyptian side of things and some of these, and some of the massive influences across the region are all based on humor, right? So there is that, but you just have to be, I guess, culturally mindful in the fact that you're not messaging to one people, especially in the UAE. So what resonates with me may not resonate with a Polish guy, right? Or may not resonate with a Romanian woman or a Lebanese woman. So does that make sense? Like
Yeah.
you gotta, you're not speaking to one audience. Now it's a bit different when you're in Saudi because majority is Saudis, right? So there is, but UAE specifically, it's expat driven. So it goes back down to your audience. If you're a consumer brand, it's a bit easier because you've got a target audience that you may want to speak to. You may have, I don't know, ramen noodles. You're like, okay, yeah, this, they like that. But for B2B, you just got to be mindful that you're not always communicating to one persona, right? You may have kind of multiple personas and individuals that you're marketing to.
Andrew, this has been incredible. You've answered a lot of our questions, and I think we're more equipped to get started tomorrow. But there's going to be a lot of people out there that say, okay, I got it. It's complicated. I probably need someone in the region. And after having multiple conversations with you and Amit, your partner, I highly recommend reaching out to Andrew or Amit or over in the UAE to partner with as you decide to move in there. What's the best way to? I mean, we'll obviously put we'll put lots of links together on LinkedIn, but where's your preferred?
Yeah, so look, I'm active on LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn easily. My email, I'm andrew@digitalnexa.com. And look, we're always happy, and myself, Amit, a business partner, Amit at digitalnexa.com. He's Amit VS, to look for him on LinkedIn as well. We're happy to just jump on a Zoom discovery, right? So there's we're very psyched and very buzzed about this, right? Very, very buzzed about it. So the opportunity to share ideas, to make suggestions, and then ultimately potentially work with some organizations, fantastic, right? But even if nothing comes of it, just the conversations alone that we're having over the last month is truly an eye opener. So I think I'm happy to connect on those mediums. As I said, myself and Amit are most active on LinkedIn. That's kind of where we spend our time. Although I'm leaning a bit hard into TikTok lately, but that's just waste of time. So
you guys have a weekly webinar, which
we do. Yeah, that's I guess that would be pretty cool for you guys to jump in on. It's called the Digital Growth Show. It's also a podcast called the Digital Growth Show. So that goes out UAE time, 3 o'clock every Tuesday. And we kind of talk through a whole raft of topics, some Middle East specific, some global. We've been doing that now. Well, we started that right at the beginning of COVID to basically help people. We're not going to break down how to build out a landing page, but we'll just offer practical advice similar to today, right? Actually, this feels like one of those sessions. Look, we're an open book. We really, there's nothing hidden as far as and wherever we can help people, that's the goal.
I love the way we share those values, and this is turning into an incredible partnership. Thanks, Andrew, for sharing your insight with our audience, and we'll be in touch.
Yeah, thank you. Great, guys. Thank you. It was what an amazing host. I've got a tough game now, right, to pull off next week.
All good, man.
All right, guys.
Okay, that's a wrap.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
See you later. Cheers. Bye.